topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, good afternoon. Good to have you with us. I'm Bill Martinez, and it is showtime, and we're going to have a lot of fun. I got my good friend Bill Federer, the American Minute creator, is going to be joining us in just a few seconds here. We're going to talk about, the 4th of July is just around the corner. That's our 247th birthday. We're also going to talk about the history of America and what has made us so great. Bill Federer, let's bring you on right now. Always a pleasure to be with you, sir. How are you today?
It's great to be with you.
Well, let's talk history. I think you like a little bit of history, don't you?
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. So,
well, without a doubt, when you look back at the origins of this great country of ours, especially right now, in a time when you got the 1619 Project, it seems like everybody wants to rewrite the history of America. But I would say our history not only is rich, but it's very well documented, isn't it?
Well, it is. And one of the things I start off talking about is how we were breaking away from the most powerful king on the planet, the King of England. And the default setting for human government is kings, is gangs. And a king is nothing more than a glorified gang leader. And if you're friends with the king, you're more equal. You're not friends with the king, you're less equal. You're an enemy of the king, you're dead. It's called treason. And,
almost sounds like America right now. Just sidebar. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And as the centuries go on, the kingdoms get bigger because with military advancements, kings can kill more people. So instead of king killing anyone with a rock, they can kill with bronze weapon or iron weapon or a phalanx spear the Greeks had or scimitar sword that the Muslims had or gunpowder that the Chinese invented. Right. The weapon improves, but it's that same fallen nature of king killing able. And then with technological advancements, kings can track more people. Until finally, again, the King of England became the biggest. He was a globalist. He was a one world government guy. Yeah. India, Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, British Guyana, Canada, Barbados, Bermuda, Jamaica, and America.
That's why the sun never set, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And America's founders decided they didn't like this globalist king telling us what to do. So they flipped it and made the people the king. So what makes America great is you get to be in charge of your life, and all of us together are in charge of the country. It's a bottom-up form of government versus a top-down form of government. And so it was pretty revolutionary what the founders did. You get into the dynamics. If it had not been for a 3,000-mile ocean, if it had not been for Europe being the chessboard that everyone was fighting over, and America was a losing proposition.
Right.
Virginia went bankrupt and they had to go from a company colony to a royal crown colony. And the king sent over a royal crown governor saying, I'm not going to pay you. You're going to have to get your money out of these colonies. And the royal governor got everyone together and said, okay, you're the landowners, cough up the money. And he let them talk about other stuff when they got together. And that backdoored Virginia into a legislative assembly. But Europe was the chessboard and there was no gold. The first boat that the Jamestown settlers sent back to England was filled with iron pyrite. Fool's gold, right? I mean, they thought they were it was going to be like the Spanish Main or something.
Right.
And so America was something that went for a century without being noticed because as long as we didn't bother the king, he sort of let us do what we wanted. And then the other big thing was
like they say, Bill, it's always about location, right? And God had set this up in such a way to where we could operate and really take roots and do the early business of democracy without even really realizing it. And again, going back to what you were saying earlier, not only that, but the fact that we were doing something so revolutionary in coming up with this idea that we, the people, would be at the top of the org chart. When I remember the first time we talked about that, I thought, wow, how brilliant, because how do you manage hundreds of thousands of people. Now we're up to what, 330, 340 million people. How can you possibly manage the lives of those people? And our founding fathers said, well, the best way to manage them is to let them manage themselves, right?
Yeah, it is to take the Tower of Babel and scatter it.
Yeah.
Take the concentrated power of a king and separate it federal to state level, separate it local communities, separate it, all the way to the individual, and then tie up this federal Frankenstein monster with 10 handcuffs we call the first 10 amendments. The preoccupation of the founders was they wanted to take the power of ruling and separate it. Mm-hmm. In other words, in a sense, the motivation for the Constitution was to prevent a president from ruling through mandates and executive orders.
Exactly.
Whenever you see that says, the president issues a mandate, the president issues an executive order, that's exactly what the Constitution was intended to prevent.
Exactly.
They designed a government that would be slow to making good decisions, but thank God, slow to making irreversible bad decisions. They realized it could take a lifetime to build a mansion and one irresponsible match to burn the thing down in a day.
Exactly.
So they wanted a government that worked very slowly. And so whenever you have a politician saying, we got to get this done right away, it's like, no, we don't. They say, well, it's an emergency.
Every time we do it right away, we get right away problems.
Yeah, they say, well, it's an emergency. It's like our country was birthed out of an emergency. The founders knew emergencies, and they wanted to make a government that would not react in an emergency.
Exactly.
Right? And so anyway, so when we look at the uniqueness of America, that we're this experiment of us ruling ourselves without a king, the philosophical background for this came from the New England colonies, which came from the New England pastors, which came from their congregational form of government that they got from the Bible. What part of the Bible? That first 400 years out of Egypt before King Saul. And so the King of England looked to the Bible for his authority, but he looked to the anointed King Saul, who's the first king of Israel, and on. And the Calvinist Puritans that founded New England, they looked to the Bible, but they looked to the pre-King Saul period. There's 400 years with no king.
Yeah, no, that time when God was king.
Yeah,
right.
And so this first 400 years is called the Hebrew Republic, and that's why they taught Hebrew at Yale and Harvard. And in ancient Israel, everybody was taught the law, and everybody felt personally accountable to God to follow the law because there was a God who was watching them. And this God wanted them to be fair. And this God was going to hold them accountable in the future. So you could maintain complete order because of this God of the Bible.
Exactly.
But if you get rid of this God, then all you have is a bunch of rules made up by a bunch of old white men. Why? Follow them. Yeah. And then it begins to turn into, well, I'm not going to follow. And so what do you have left? Human passions, lust, greed, anger, violence. And it's going to turn into mobs in the street, smashing windows, and then setting things on fire. And everybody's going to say, we want that. Somebody's got to restore order. And the government comes in and says, we'll restore it, but we need some emergency powers. And then the rubber band snaps back and you got a king.
And there you go. Might making right. It's this cycle that just keeps on recurring, right, Bill? I mean, it's amazing because here, even with our founding fathers in the early years after the American Revolution, and thank God for, George Washington. I mean, was he God's handpicked man for that time, refusing to be a king? He instinctively knew that that would complicate things. It would compromise this great American idea from the get-go. But there's just something about humanoids. We can't help ourselves. We just, we want a king like everybody else, right? And here today, we we got one. How you liking it now, huh?
Yeah, it's interesting. Robert Frost, a poet, said Washington was one of the few men in the whole history of the world that was not tempted with power. And so you look at this, where he was the commander of the army that defeated the most powerful military in the world, and he could have made himself king. Yes. Matter of fact, there was what's called the Newburgh Conspiracy, where about a year before the war ended, the soldiers had not been paid. And there was a conspiracy of these generals to simply march into Washington, D.C., which is where our capital was, And
Hey, Bill, let me halt you right now because we're running out of time. We got to go to break real quick. Let's pick it up. That way we'll have more time in which to finish the story. It's really important for everybody to hear. We've got more from Bill Federer after this. Stay with us.
Would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-699-0358. 800-699-0358. 800-699-0358. That's 800-699-0358.
President Biden recently released a massive $6 trillion budget, the largest budget in U.S. history. And guess who pays the bill? That's right, you, the American taxpayer. American citizens and business owners will be paying more taxes. That's a fact. And if you owe back taxes, they will be coming after you to collect payments. In fact, President Biden also hired thousands more IRS agents to go after you. If you got a letter from the IRS and you know you owe back taxes or you haven't filed in years, don't put your head in the sand. Call us today. We've saved our customers millions of tax dollars. One quick, free phone call will show you how we can reduce your past tax bill and save you thousands. Guaranteed, or you pay nothing. Call now.
800-932-1597. 800-932-1597. That's 800-932-1597. Paid for by the Tax Helpline. If you're 65 or older and Medicare is your main source of insurance, pay close attention right now and listen for details on how you may save thousands of dollars on your health care costs. Did you know that Medicare can pay for things like dental visits, home delivery of drugs, even a gym membership? Call us right now and learn how to unlock all your Medicare benefits. Medicare and supplemental plans that we provide can even offer you drug coverage with zero copays and pay for transportation to your doctors. Medicare plans can offer you wonderful money-saving benefits, but you've got to call now. We'll help you get the most out of your Medicare. Make this free, no-obligation call now. Save a ton of money on your health care costs and get the code to unlock all your earned Medicare benefits. Paid for by Senior Choice Plans. 800-796-3954. 800-796-3954. That's 800-796-3954.
Hey, we're back with you with my favorite historian, the one and only Bill Federer, the American Minute creator. We're talking American history because a lot of this stuff, you know, Bill Federer, I can tell you, oftentimes when you're on the show, in the radio show in the morning, and now in this show, I'm sure I'm going to get the same kind of responses. Is parents will say, how come my kids aren't being taught this? Or even the kids will say, how come I'm not being taught this? Sadly, American history somehow has become a problem for some in this country, a minority, I would say, of people in this country. But yet, unfortunately, they are controlling the levers and dictating that maybe our kids should be taught things more about sex than the wholesomeness and the miracles that God has extended upon this great country of ours.
Yeah, it's a socialist tactic called deconstruction, where you intentionally say bad things about a country's founders so the students emotionally detach from them. Then you get them into a neutral position where they don't remember where they came from. And then you can brainwash them into whatever future you have planned for them. It's a sales technique.
Right.
If I was a toothpaste salesman, the first thing I do is tell you negative things about the toothpaste you're currently brushing with. You're still brushing with that stuff. Haven't you read it's going to eat the enamel off your teeth? Ooh, you're repulsed by it. Now I have you in a neutral, you're open-minded. What are all the toothpaste out there? Then I give you my pitch for this brand new tartar control breath freshener toothpaste. So it's a dry neutral reverse. It's sort of a gene replacement therapy for a culture, right? It's
right.
Like you take out the old identity DNA, you put in the new. And so this is the tactic that they've been doing. It happened in Europe. Went from 1,000 years of Catholic cathedrals, Protestant Reformation, Jewish neighborhoods to the French Revolution. And it was secular Europe, free sex, anything goes. And now it's turning into a Islamic Sharia Europe, with Muhammad being the number one name for newborns and socialism. Mm-hmm. And so what's been happening in the schools is intentional. And you have the 1619 Project and Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States, where you intentionally make all of the founders bad. Yeah. And forget the fact that they gave us a country where you get to be in charge of your life, and all of us together are in charge of the country, and how unique this is in the 6,000 years of recorded human history. Forget all that. They're bad people. And so you got to throw away everything they did. And so now we have no memory of it. And then it's easy for them to come in and brainwash you. And I tell people there's two ways for people to give up their freedoms: fear and free stuff. When people are afraid, they'll trade their freedom for security. And then free stuff, right? The government's so nice, it's giving you stuff until you get dependent, and you want more free stuff. You have to sell yourself into prostitution, right? So it's like a drug dealer takes over a neighborhood two ways. Comes in with guns and gets people into fear, they submit, or he's giving away free drugs until you get hooked. And, yeah. So these are the tactics that are being used to get Americans to give up their freedom. You capitalize on this fear. And then they knee-jerk reaction, they panic. Oh, I got to surrender everything. There's a financial crisis. Let's surrender to the government. Have them give us CBDC, central bank digital currency. Yeah, they'll fix it, but they'll control everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's surrender to the World Health Organization. It's a pandemic. Hurry up, surrender. There's an interesting quote from Peter Thiel, founder of PayPal, and he was at Stanford University in November 2022, and he said. The zeitgeist or the worldview on the left will not survive another century. So we need to immediately surrender to a globalist, totalitarian, one world government. And he said, whatever the future holds, we can't underestimate the danger of a one world totalitarian government. And then he ends with a scripture, which is sort of unusual. Peter Thiel quoting a scripture, but he said, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, he says, the motto of the Antichrist is peace and safety. He says, I think we would do better to be more afraid of the Antichrist and less afraid of Armageddon.
Ooh.
You know what you're talking about? Yeah, let's not be afraid of the world ending because of climate change and the world ending because of a pandemic in the world. Let's not be afraid of the world ending stuff. Let's be afraid of the people that are going to save us from the world ending.
Exactly.
Right? He says the Antichrist, well, peace, I'll fix it. Just surrender everything to me, and I'll save you from this crisis. It's like, well, maybe you're the one behind creating the crises to get people into fear and panic, so they'll surrender to you.
Yes, exactly. As you were talking, I was thinking, and that's what I was Googling here to remember that famous saying that those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. I would think the last 2.5 years taught us that quite resoundingly.
Yes. And but I did have a few comments about George Washington, just because he's so unique. So he was unanimously chosen to be the Army's commander in chief. He was unanimously chosen to be the president of the Constitutional Convention, where they wrote the Constitution. He was unanimously chosen as the first U.S. president and unanimously reelected to a second term. No one's ever been in those positions before. And he said that arms are the last thing to pick up and the first thing to put down. One of the stories that I love is the Newburgh conspiracy. And
yes,
so
I'm glad you're transitioning there, because I wanted to get you back there. Go ahead.
So we win the Battle of Yorktown, but the Continental Army had not been paid for years. I mean, here they are fighting, risking their lives, and they're not getting paid. And so a bunch of officers met in New York to form this Newburgh conspiracy. And they were planning on marching into New York City, which was the capital originally of the country, and to take over the government and force them to pay the soldiers their back pay and their pensions. Well, at the meeting, March 15th, 1783, guess who shows up but George Washington? And he quietly walks in. He goes to the front. He pulls out of his pocket his spectacles, his glasses. And nobody ever saw him wearing glasses before. And he pulls out a piece of paper and he unfolds it. And he says, "Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown gray, but almost blind in the service of my country."
Wow.
And then he goes on to say, "Let me conjure you in the name of our common country, as you value your own sacred honor, to express your utmost horror and detestation of the man who wishes to overturn the liberties of our country and who wickedly attempts to open the floodgates of civil discord, the deluge rising from the empire in blood." Anyway, he says, "You will afford occasion for posterity to say, had this day been wanting, the world had never seen the last stage of perfection which human nature is capable of attaining." Anyway, he basically says that all the blood of your fellow soldiers will have been in vain if we go back to instituting a military dictatorship. He folds up his piece of paper, walks out of the room. The Newburgh conspiracy dissolves. I mean, he could have very easily said, "Okay, guys, I'm with you. Let's go." And they could have made him king.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then there's a great story of the artist Benjamin West. And he was born in America. But he's a loyalist, so he goes back to Britain, and he's painting the portrait of King George III. And they're making small talk because it takes a long time to make portraits. And the king says, "Well, what's the rumor? What do people say that this George Washington is going to do now that he has defeated the king's army?" And Benjamin West said, "They say, Your Highness, that he's going to return to his farm." The king says, "If he does that, he truly will be the greatest man in the world." You go from all the world's history, it's kings killing to get power.
Exactly. Kings
killing to keep power. Washington had the power, and he's going to give it up and go back to his farm. And so there was, they looked back to ancient Israel, but they also looked back to ancient Greece and Rome. And there was a period before Caesar that it was a Roman republic, and they had 600 senators, no king. But if they needed something done in a hurry, like during an attack, they had a position called a dictator. But for the Romans, it was a 1-year term. And so they got this guy named Cincinnatus. He left his farm, came in, organized Rome. He was good at that. They fought. They defeated the enemy. He went back to his farm. Later, he's 80 years old. Roman republic's attacked again. They get him off his farm, comes in for a year. He's in charge. He organizes everything. They win. He goes back to his farm. And this was such a noble example that the founding fathers started the Order of Cincinnatus. And of course, Cincinnati, Ohio is named after him. And it's this idea that you use the weapons, but then you put them down and you go back to the legislative form of government.
Right.
And now Julius Caesar wanted to be, quote unquote, dictator for life. Sort of like Xi Jinping says, "I want to be president for life." Why even call yourself president?
Exactly.
Just call yourself dictator.
Might as well.
Almost the same thing with Putin in Russia, right? I mean, And
I'll tell you, Bill, we're out of time again. Let's come back. We'll pick it up from there. We've got more from Bill Federer after this. Stay with us.
Do you have heart failure and often hear,
"Those stomach issues ruined your birthday"?
"You're too tired to play catch, Grandpa."
Sweetie, you haven't touched your tools since the carpal tunnel syndrome diagnosis.
if these seemingly unrelated symptoms sound familiar, talk to your cardiologist and ask about transthyretin amyloid cardiomyopathy, or ATTR-CM, a rare and underdiagnosed disease that gets worse over time. Learn more at connecttoyourheart.com. That's connecttoyourheart.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-699-0358. 800-699-0358. 800-699-0358. That's 800-699-0358. How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-699-0358. 800-699-0358. 800-699-0358. That's 800-699-0358. If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers. If you administer insulin 3 or more times per day or use an insulin pump, call now and learn how a CGM can help you.
Painless. No more pricking my finger.
No finger pricks.
Convenience. They delivered it free and they took care of all the paperwork.
You can reduce pain right away. Plus, it's accurate, easy to use, and helps you spend more time in range. And if you have insurance, you can get a new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. Call now and get free shipping of your new CGM. Plus, we'll bill your insurance for you. 800-823-9853. 800-823-9853. 800-823-9853. That's 800-823-9853.
Hey, we're back with you. You know, the reason we do this show is because we have a country to save here. We the people. It takes all of us, all hands on deck, to do something to right the ship. This isn't about a Republican Party or Democratic thing. The partisanship is what got us into this mess to begin with. This is why it's so important and critical to have, people like Bill Federer on the show, because it reminds us of why America to begin with. And right now, we have a campaign to save this country, and you're invited to join our listener-supported campaign. It's tax deductible, by the way. We're in partnership with Hill of Hope. It's a 501c3 public nonprofit organization. And so when you go to our website at BillMartinezShow.com, click the donate button. $5, $7. I always like $7. 7 is a great number. I like $7 because it's the number for completion. And it's just my faith and it's one of my favorite numbers. But whatever number comes to your mind, whatever God has moved on your heart to support this campaign to get this country back on track, we say thank you. So again, I'm reminding you, it's tax deductible. Go to our website, BillMartinezShow.com. Bill Federer continues with us. And Bill, for a moment, I want to, show and brag about your books, The American Minute, Miracles, and so many publications that you make available that are just rich with history and are just such a blessing.
Well, you're so kind. The Miracles in American History is a fun one. My wife and I put that together, and they're stories where there's a crisis, they pray, and things turn around. And a couple during the Revolution.
Imagine that, huh? Imagine that. I mean, because it's like that's how our country was born. We had a crisis. The Pilgrims prayed their hearts out for something like 12 years. God answered their prayer and brings them to America, right?
Yes. And so one of the battles that is my favorite is the Battle of Brooklyn Heights. And so the Americans are in New York, and the British assemble the largest invasion force in world history up to this point, when you consider all the firepower on these ships that are 3 decks and cannons, and they begin to fill up New York's harbor. And they have 400 ships, 32,000 troops. All of a sudden, it's getting serious for America because we have this thrown together ragtag army. And you have the Continental Congress has a day of, get this, fasting and prayer. And it says that we observe a day of humiliation, fasting, and prayer. With united hearts, bewail and confess our manifold sins and transgressions, and by sincere repentance and amendment of life, appease God's righteous displeasure, and through the merits and mediation of Jesus Christ, obtain this pardon and forgiveness. So this is the same Continental Congress just 2 months before the Declaration of Independence, having a day of fasting. They rush a copy of this day of fasting out to Washington, and he gives an order to his troops. He says, the Continental Congress, having ordered the 17th of May of 1776 to be observed as a day of humiliation, fasting, prayer, humbly to supplicate the mercy of Almighty God. He says, the general commands all officers and soldiers to pay strict obedience to the orders of the Continental Congress, that by their unfeigned and pious observance of their religious duties may incline the Lord and giver of victory to prosper our arms. So Washington is ordering his troops to observe this day of fasting. And then you have the British have a loyalist, and he shows the British where to land away from where the Americans are, who are dug in facing the East River. And this loyalist leads the British all night long through Jamaica Pass, and they attack George Washington from behind on the morning of August 27th, 1776. It's the biggest battle of the entire Revolutionary War. 3,000 Americans are killed. Only 300 British. It's totally lopsided. Wow. And all the Americans are scrambling because they're being attacked from behind, and all their defenses are facing the water. And the Maryland Regiment, 400 of these young men, turn and they charge into the British lines once, twice, 6 times until all of them are killed. Wow. But it buys time, and Washington's watching them from a distance. And he says, good God, what brave fellows I've lost this day. And so whenever they would have the troops marching in parade, he would always have the Maryland Regiment go first to remember these guys. Anyway, they fight, and then the sun goes down. And Washington is pinned up against the water with these 8,000-10,000 British troops behind him, the water in front of him. The thought's probably going through his mind, the next day he'll be killed. But instead, he gets every boat he can find, and he begins to ferry the troops across the East River to Manhattan Island. And they're doing it quiet, pitch black. They get about half the troops moved, and then the sun starts to come up. And the American chief of intelligence is Ben Talmadge. And he says, as the dawn of the next day approached, those of us who remained in the trenches became very anxious for our own safety. And when the dawn appeared, there were several regiments still on duty. At this time, a very dense fog began to rise off the river and seemed to settle in a peculiar manner over both encampments. I recollect this peculiar providential occurrence perfectly well, and so very dense was the atmosphere that you could scarcely discern a man at 6 yards distance. We tarried until the sun had risen, but the fog remained as dense as ever. And so Washington's able to continue to evacuate his troops. He's on the last boat that leaves. The fog lifts, the British charge, no one's there. It was the last chance the British had to capture the entire American army all at once.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a miracle in American history. Washington writes, the hand of Providence has been so conspicuous in the course of the war that he must be worse than an infidel that lacks faith. But it will be time enough for me to turn preacher when my present appointment ceases. But here at the very beginning of the war, it could have been over right then and there.
Yeah,
but
without a doubt.
Fog came.
Bill, let's fast forward a little bit. I mean, this history of ours is just packed with one miracle after another. We're talking, the early Revolutionary War between us and England. Let's go. How about World War II? Let's talk about some miracles that happened during World War II.
Well, there's the Battle of Midway, June 4th of 1942. And Japan had a powerful navy, and they had 4 aircraft carriers that were headed toward Midway Island. And the Americans broke the Japanese code and were planning on ambushing, but they couldn't find the Japanese fleet in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And so you had the American torpedo bombers, and they took off first, and they would fly low across the water, release the torpedo that would go under the water, and then hopefully hit the side of the ship. Well, the Japanese shot every one of them down, and all of them died except one who was rescued from the water, but none of their ships hit their target. And you think, oh, what a waste of life. Well, it served a purpose because the Japanese had all of their planes take off to shoot the Americans down. And now the planes that landed, and they were refueling and rearming them. And they had these slow elevators to bring the supplies up from the lower decks to the top deck. And so, and then you have the American dive bombers, and they're flying at a very high altitude, and they see a break through the clouds. And the way the dive bomber works is you literally point your plane straight down at the ship like you're going to crash into it, and you're going full speed, and then you unhook the bomb, and then you pull up as fast as you can so you don't crash into it.
Exactly.
And so you had Dick Best was one of the dive bombers, and so they were able to sink 3, and then the 4th was so badly damaged that the Japanese evacuated everybody off it, and they sank it themselves. But within just a couple hours, you had the Japanese Navy cut in half. Wow. And they immediately had to go on the defensive instead of the offensive. And this was a miraculous turning point in the Pacific War. And
once again, but for the hand of God, time and again throughout this rich history of America, Bill Federer, and I cannot thank you enough for being the vanguard and being the historian that you are, to bring this to us. We've got to go to break. We come back, we're going to talk about one of my favorite holidays of this great country of ours. More from Bill Federer on the other side of the break. Stay with us. We've got more.
Has your heater or air conditioner busted? Appliance broken? Computer crashed? Then you need an ARW home warranty. Home system and appliance repairs and replacements can cause stress and cost you thousands of dollars per year. With an A-plus BBB rating and a top-rated home warranty company on Consumer Affairs and Trustpilot, ARW Home provides superior service, featuring the industry's lowest service call fee. ARW Home has warranty plans that cover your kitchen and laundry appliances. heating and air conditioning systems, electrical and plumbing systems, and much more. Call 800-559-7562 to customize your plan. Plus, ARW has partnered with Azurian to protect your new and used tablets, laptops, TVs, and other home tech from accidental damage and wear and tear. All plans come with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Call 800-559-7562. That's 800-559-7562. How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-699-0358. 800-699-0358. 800-699-0358. That's 800-699-0358.
I am a non-attorney spokesperson representing a team of lawyers who help people that have been injured or wronged. Have you been diagnosed with cancer? Do you use pesticides in your job? Specifically Roundup. Roundup, made by Monsanto, contains a chemical called glyphosate, which has been linked to cancer. If you've used Roundup and you have cancer, you may be entitled to a cash award. Over $10 billion has been set aside to pay users of Roundup who've been diagnosed with cancer. Time is almost running out to file your claim. So if you've been diagnosed with cancer and you've used Roundup, call the legal helpline now. You could receive a free cash award and have your medical expenses covered. And time to file is almost gone, so please call right now.
800-890-7088. 800-890-7088. 800-890-7088. That's 800-890-7088.
Bill Martinez here, along with Bill Federer. And Bill, I want to give you a chance to tell our audience, because you've got all this great information. You bless us every day by sending out the American Minute to all your subscribers. And this is so cool. I mean, people find a way of using it, especially teachers. Teachers love getting the American Minute because it gives them something to talk about in the classroom and keep our history up front and live in front of these young kids. Tell our audience how they can get involved and be a subscriber to the American Minute.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's AmericanMinute.com, AmericanMinute.com. And what I've been talking about today is a book called Miracles in American History. We have a new gift edition with 50 stories all together in one volume. And I had one father say that he would read a chapter, because they're short chapters, to his son every night. And after a month or so, he got through all the stories. And then the son said, "Aren't you going to read from that book again?" And the dad said he really, really liked them. So there's, Sergeant Alvin York, World War I, where he single-handedly captures 132 Germans and takes out their machine gun nests single-handedly. And he's a sharpshooter from the backwoods of Kentucky. And afterwards, he gets the Medal of Honor. And he said, some of them officers been saying that me being a mountain boy, done all these things just by instinct. He goes, that can't account for the fact that I came out alive. Capturing, he said, the hand of God must have been in that fight, because I hadn't ever had much learning except from the Bible, Right. So he comes back to America and starts a Bible school, Sergeant Alvin York. And then you have the Battle of the Bulge. And so you have D-Day, where you have the over 100,000 Allied troops land on the coast of Normandy, and they're pushing the Nazis back. And then the Nazis decide to make one last push to get back to Antwerp, Holland, so they can get a port where they can get gas, because they're running out of gas.
That's right.
And so they do their blitzkrieg, and they catch a bunch of Americans behind enemy lines. And so Bastogne in Belgium is the city where there's 8 different roads that go through there. So it's strategic, and the Nazis surround them, and they demand that they surrender. Well, coming to the rescue is General Patton with the Third Army, but he can't move because the weather is so cloudy and rainy and mucky and snowy that the planes can't fly to give him air cover. And so he gets his chaplain, James O'Neill, and tells him to compose a prayer. And if you've ever seen the movie Patton, it's depicted in the movie. And he composes a prayer. They printed on 250,000 index cards with Patton's Christmas greeting to his troops on the flip side. My father-in-law was in a nursing home before he died, and the guy in the room next to him was in Patton's army, and he had that card. He showed it to us. Right?
Wow, how cool.
And so this is the prayer. It says, Heavenly Father, we beseech thee that thou establish thy justice among the nations. Hearken to us as men and soldiers that pray unto you. Save us from these immoderate weather. And anyway, the next day the sky clears. The army marches. They come to the rescue of the 101st Airborne. I talked to a soldier that had been there. He says that the freezing cold and these Nazi tanks were coming, but then they ran out of gas. He says they were just one cornfield away. You could look at them and they're going, and then the lid opens, conk, and then the guy scurries out. And so there were all these abandoned tanks because they ran out of gas. And just an amazing story of courage. General Anthony McAuliffe was the American general. When the Nazis had first surrounded him, they told him to surrender. And his response was nuts. and they brought that back to the Nazi commander. It's like, nuts. Well, what does that mean? But,
it's acrostic I'm sure it's acrostic for something. Hey, Bill, I'm not sure if I told you this, but my dad was at the Battle of the Bulge. He was a medic there with Patton. And, I've searched through some, he has since passed, and I've searched through some of his archives of that to see if I could find that Patton prayer. I'm sure he must have gotten one.
Yeah. And there's copies of it on the internet. People, taking shots of it. But, well, that's fascinating, Bill, that your dad was there. My.
Yeah. Our family has a history of military service that we're quite proud of, and so thankful to a country that has given us, the opportunities that we have, Bill. And I think this is why, the 4th of July has always been so special to us, and to most Americans. And this year will be our 247th birthday, right?
Yeah.
Well, we've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to let you, remind us why the 4th of July is so significant.
Well, it is a turning point in world history that you have people ruling ourselves without a king. And you don't appreciate that until you study all the rest of history. I also talk about the War of 1812. And so when the revolution ended, they went to Ben Franklin and they said, "Oh, we've won independence." He says, "No, we won the revolution. The battle for independence is yet to come." What's he talking about? Well, the British regrouped, and our president was James Madison, and he cancels the charter for the Bank of the United States, which was a private bank that had a lot of British investors in it. And because he said this bank is too powerful, it's setting the interest rates for our country, and it can sort of a globalist bank because the stockholders were a lot of these British. And so he cancels the charter. And sure enough, right after that, the War of 1812 starts. And the number of stories. One is the Battle of Lake Erie. So the British controlled Detroit and all the Northwest Territory, out of which 6 states came from. Huge territory. Right. But the British controlled Detroit. And so we don't even have a boat on Lake Erie. We don't have a port on Lake Erie. And so we build the boats on land and drag them across a sandbar to get them into Lake Erie. And the captain is 28-year-old Oliver Hazard Perry. And most of his crew are free blacks from Ohio. And they've never really fought in battles before. And they confront the British Admiral Robert Barclay. He lost an arm fighting Napoleon at the Battle of Trafalgar. And the British have long-range cannons. And they're pummeling Oliver Hazard Perry's flagship, the USS Lawrence, to pieces. But then suddenly the wind changes directions, and the British ships have to turn around, and they get their sails entangled. The ships were turning in the opposite directions, and they were too close. And they're sitting there trying to figure out how do they untangle all these ropes. And Oliver Hazard Perry seizes the opportunity. He sails his ship by, and he fires every cannon like a madman. He disables the entire squadron of 6 British ships.
Oh, wow.
Smoke clears, and then he tells the men on deck, the prayers of my wife are answered. He writes to the Secretary of War, said, by the providence of God, that we've had a sanguinary, bloody conflict, and God has delivered it, to us. And James Madison thanks God for the victory.
Yeah.
But that allowed us to take back Detroit and all this land out of which 6 states came from. And then you had Washington, D.C., and the British this time marched right into our capital. And everybody's running away. Dolly Madison takes a picture of George Washington off the mantle of the fireplace, and she's riding out of town. British run in, and they set fire to the city, and everything's up in flames. And then suddenly a storm comes in. And tornadoes pick up British cannons, throw them yards away, and rains extinguish the fires. The British Admiral George Cockburn exclaims to a lady, "Great God, madame, is this the kind of storm to which you are accustomed to in this infernal country?" To which the lady replied, "No, sir, this is a special interposition of Providence to drive our enemies from our city."
Amen.
And the British are driven out. But just an amazing story. And then there's the Battle of New Orleans. But it's all in the book, Miracles in American History. And then AmericanMinute.com is my website.
Bill, about a minute left here. Again, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing our great history and getting us ready to celebrate July 4th, our 247th birthday, rich with history, a time for us to get together. This is a time that I also remind everybody, Bill, you and I have discussed this before, pull out the Constitution, read it. I mean, you're there with family picnics and family friends and everything like that on this 4th of July weekend. Pull it out and be blessed by reading the Constitution of the United States. I know that will open up a grand tradition for families across the country. It will bless you all richly. Bill Federer, again, thank you for being with us. Again, the website, real quick, remind everybody.
It's AmericanMinute.com.
Check it out, ladies and gentlemen, for more information and to be a part of this, righteous revolution and the mighty Martinez movement to return to God and to save our country. Check it out, BillMartinezShow.com. May God bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you. Go and be blessed beyond your imagination. Thank you.